Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Secure Talk. My name is Mark Schreiner, and I'll be your host for this episode of Secure Talk. Today, we're going to be talking with Aviv Grafi, who is the founder and CTO of Votiro. And we're going to be talking with Aviv about, the threats that file content pose to enterprises and what companies can do to kind of protect themselves from the threats that are sometimes hidden in file contents. But before we do that, let's say hi to Aviv. Aviv, how are you today?
Great. Thank you, Mark, for inviting me to the show. I'm great.
It's my pleasure. And I just prior to hitting the record button, you mentioned that you're based in Tel Aviv.
That's right. I'm based in Tel Aviv, Israel. I was born here and yeah.
I noticed in your bio that you served in the elite intelligence unit of the IDF, which I think is the Israeli Defense Force.
Yes, that's the Israeli Defense Force. To be more precise, that would be the equivalent of the NSA.
Okay.
Yeah, so mainly focusing on intelligence and security, actually.
Actually, so is that how you got your start or your interest in cybersecurity?
So actually, I started my background in cybersecurity even before that. I was actually as a teenager, I was very curious, and I was kind of breaking things apart, and in most of the times I was able to assemble them back. But in some cases, I couldn't, and I found it's very intriguing. So I started to spend some time, researching some stuff, hacking for fun. And I think that was the point where the intelligence forces they kind of recruited me, as some of the audience probably know. In Israel, we do have to do our military service. Every young boy or girl, when we get to 18, we need to do a 3-year service. So I was recruited, and I served actually more than that. I served about almost 5 years in the intelligence forces, mainly focusing on security, defense, and offense operations. And this was really, really exciting and very, interesting times, actually.
So, it's interesting. You got your start as a teenager, and actually, one of my one of my boys, is interested in learning more about cybersecurity, potentially ethical hacking and things like that. What advice would you give to anyone that's, still in high school but wants to learn about cybersecurity?
So first, I think the one major difference is that back then it was, I think the knowledge was not as spread as today. I think today there's flood and probably more than what you can eat in terms of knowledge. But I think the best advice I can give is just try, and get your hands dirty. I think it's way, way better than a lot of a lot of the books or theoretical kind of exercises. So just get your hands dirty. You will learn from experience way more than what you learn from theory.
So when you say get your hands dirty, you're actually, trying different types of hacks, of course, in a controlled, ethical manner, but actually doing, like setting up a lab or something to, set up your VMs and then try to do different attacks or different exploits, things like that.
Yeah, I think there are tons of tutorials and probably labs, as you mentioned. So you can actually try in a controlled environment, like in a lab, like with a VM, and having step-by-step kind of walkthrough of how to execute certain attack or certain exploit. And I think that's what you learn from that. And then maybe take another thing and try to guess the next steps. And I think that's the best way to learn. And you get your experience and your skill set from those experiences rather than reading how someone else done it. I think it's great for knowledge, but if you want to really, really polish your thinking, and I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah, I think that's true in almost any endeavor. Theory is nice, but there's nothing better than, real hands-on practice. So let me ask you, it seems that there's a lot of cybersecurity related companies and startups that come from Israel. Why is that?
So I think there are two main reasons. One is that obviously, as a lot of us doing in our military service, a lot of us serving in those kind of intelligence unit, and I think in our neighborhood, is kind of we need to invent ourselves, and we need to be more pioneer in a lot of aspects around security. I think that maybe years ago that was, creating some innovative technology for defense, maybe some, either missiles or protecting some vehicles. But today it's mostly on the cyber warfare, right? So I think a lot of us, we had our experience in the army, and there's a lot of community here around security, pretty big community, and in something in the Israeli mindset around we can make it on our own and not necessarily work for big corporates. So a lot of us, a lot of the young folks, they want to have their own venture, they want to have their own startups. That's actually how I got, I founded Votiro. I was working for a couple of startups after my army service. I was 20 something years old. And I said to myself, look, I want to have my own thing. I'm not sure what I want to have, but I want to have my own business. And I think this is kind of a mindset that is pretty common here in Israel. I think this is influencing a lot of the cybersecurity ecosystem here, along with the great talent that develops here.
Makes a lot of sense. And having a community around you with like-minded goals or interests is super, super important. I mean, you have that there with your startup community, also the interest in cybersecurity. There are other obviously pockets, places like Silicon Valley. There's, here in the Seattle area where I'm at, there's, obviously a lot of different tech startups. But even it's funny because I just read the biography from the bass player of Guns N' Roses, and he grew up in this community of musicians here in Seattle, and it's just so much easier to advance your skills if you're surrounded by people that are doing something similar. So it sounds like a pretty exciting time to be in Tel Aviv if you're in a cybersecurity startup. What is zero trust content security? And I should preface that by telling the audience that that is the type of service that Votiro provides. But can you kind of define that for me?
Sure. So for those of you familiar with we're not familiar with the zero trust concept. The zero trust concept means that we actually working as the opposite in how we worked until just recently. And practically that means that we're not trusting the identity, for example, of that user or accessing a certain resource. That is mostly zero trust from network and identity perspective. And this is what we see most of the kind of companies, platforms, products out there. They aiming towards zero trust around the network and identity. So if someone want to access certain resource in the network, by default to be denied, and we have set of policies and processes to grant that permission only for the user to access that specific resource. Now, the thing is that even if we did that, and there's kind of evolution as we see that in the zero trust model, that first came the network, then came the identity altogether, but we do need to implement that for data as well. And I want to give you an example of what is zero trust for content. If you think about a lot of the documents that we're exchanging these days, for example, when I share with you my document of my bio before the show, you got it as a Word document, right? Now, you open that Word document because that's what you do, right? You want to run this show, you want to read that bio, but in fact, it could be a weaponized document. And by saying, yes, I know I trust the identity of Aviv, or maybe I trust that email provider that I'm fetching the document from, it's not enough. And that's why we said the content itself that is served need to be also treated in a zero trust manner. And that's kind of how what stands behind Votiro's technology, which called content disarm and reconstruction, which I'm happy to share more about.
Yeah, I would definitely want you to do that. But before you do that, um, explain then, okay, in the context that you just described, how does, if there's no trust, how does a document get approved, or how does an email get approved? There must be some kind of internal check there.
Yeah. So maybe before explaining that, I want to explain the background on how we got to that zero trust for content. So one of the things I did before I founded Votiro, I was doing services, penetration testing and audits, security audits for companies around the world. And there was something that I found that after 3 or 4 or 5 days of interviewing the IT staff and checking their systems, is that I could easily hack almost any client. I got my hands on their on one of their keyboards there, and it's just sending a weaponized document which looks like a resume to the recruiting department,
Yeah.
and sending that and saying, "Hey, I want to apply to a position and work with you, Mark. I want to help you with the show." And I know, by the way, Aviv, the guest that you actually hosted last week, so I'll be happy to provide reference if needed. And your job, Mark, because you want to have that job, allocated. So you would need to screen those hundreds of resumes a week, and that would work 100% of the times. And then I thought to myself, okay, 30 years after we invented all those fancy detection technologies like antivirus, anti-malware, sandboxing, EDR, all those technologies, and yet we're still getting hit by documents, which is content. And I thought, okay, so Mark, what are you really interested in when I'm sending you that resume? And probably you would say, I'm interested in the content of that resume, not the actual PDF or Word document that the vulnerability or the exploit actually embedded in it. So what if I will take that content of that resume and I will replicate that to a fresh template of that Word document and deliver that to you in milliseconds? In that case, you would feel the exact same experience. You're actually reading the exact same resume from your perspective, but the bits, the underlying bits that actually are mandatory for the bad guy to execute the attack, are just not there anymore.
So it's almost like that you could just take a screen capture of the document and then just take a look at the images that's in the text. I'm sure that that's not the technology, but basically you're allowing people to see the content in a way without actually opening the everything that's inside the document.
Yes, in some way, it's like zero scoping the document, but we preserve all the functionality. So if you're expecting to have a Word document, you will get a Word document with everything in it, like you never knew that we were there, because we're taking the content, the known good of that document, and placing that on a fresh template. If you think about that, it's like most of the technologies out there, they're trying to find the bad stuff in content. So let's say you're receiving a Word document and then you're sending that to your favorite anti-malware technology or EDR, and you say, okay, do you see if there's something bad in it? And the anti-malware would say, I haven't seen anything that looks suspicious, so probably it's fine, I guess. And that's how you deliver malware. But what we say, instead of looking for the bad stuff, which to be honest, as ex black hat, it's almost impossible, because the bad guy always faster than the good guys. So let's take the good stuff out of those documents. Let's take the content, the links, the images, everything that's really needed for our business, and deliver that. And that's the idea behind content disarm and reconstruction, or CDR, which let's take all documents, assume that they're potentially bad, because that's the logic behind zero trust for content, and deliver only the known good, which is essentially the user experience of all that content. And by applying that content security approach, or zero trust content security for documents, we can actually provide a protection that is way better than what you can have today by guessing whether a document is good or bad.
Well, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but the light bulb just came on for me, and my mind's kind of blown because this is like a total paradigm shift, and on a couple different levels. So, one, if I'm hearing you correctly, the paradigm in the past for most platforms has, hey, can we see some malicious code in this content or in this document? And if we can't, like you said, well, probably it's okay, right? But the bad guys are getting better at sneaking things in there that we can't detect, or sometimes that we miss. Maybe we don't run the AV, or we don't run one of the other systems that will detect it, or maybe that system just isn't strong enough, and so something gets through, right? Something
Right.
sneaks through the cracks. But if we just change the paradigm and say, you know what, we don't even care if there's bad stuff in there because we're not going to touch it. We're just going to take out the content that we want. and take that content and put it into a template that we know is safe, whether that's a Word document. What types of documents can you handle with your system?
So practically almost all business documents out there, like Word documents, Excel spreadsheets, PowerPoints, like images, PDFs, RTFs, like archives, like zip files, and even planning files like AutoCAD,
I
CAD.
was going to say InDesign.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, so you covered all the majors. What happens if there's a file format that that your platform doesn't handle?
So we rarely see such format, but in some businesses we do. Most of the big enterprise, sometimes there's some edge cases. So there are two options. Either we develop a support for that, or according to the policy of the organization, whether they want to run it through traditional systems or want to pass it or want to block it. But to be honest, more than 99.9 something percent of the files we support. And to be honest, we support the files with that contain risk.
Yeah.
Maybe some esoteric file, maybe we don't support it, but you need to take into account also the risk of having an exploit in it.
Makes a lot of sense. I'm just curious because, all of the, let's say all, most of the times that I come across a malicious file, it's some type of phishing campaign or some kind of, they're just blasting it out, and the document is not something that I want to access. And I'm wondering if you have any statistics at all about those kind of attacks versus the attacks that that you were talking about, where somebody, they actually want to get to the content. The content is valuable, but somebody has slipped some malicious code in there. So just to summarize, most of the time that you're hit with one of these attacks, the content's irrelevant. It's just somebody saying, "Hey, here's my resume," and I don't really want that person's resume because it's a bogus resume, right? Versus, I do want this content, but there may be some malicious code in there. I mean, do you have any kind of numbers at all?
So most of the documents obviously are benign, right? Most of the documents
Yeah.
that the enterprise receive would be benign. I think the likelihood of having someone that really implants something in the content exists, but it's relatively low. I want to share with you a case where we saw some very, very interesting attack that someone did something very similar to what you just described. So one of our financial industry customers, like one of the big enterprises in the US, um, is actually working with a law firm, and that small law firm got breached. In fact, a bad guy took over one of the mailboxes of one of the lawyers in that law firm. And that bad guy saw a thread between that lawyer and that employee in that that insurance company. And he tracked that thread and he said, okay, they're exchanging drafts of a contract. So he just hit reply on the last email in that thread and said, hey, I've attached another version of the contract. And in fact, he attached that contract, which was a malicious Word document with the malicious macro. And the clever thing that he added to that is that he password protected that Word document. So in
Yeah.
fact, if you would ask that poor employee in the insurance company, you would ask him, "Do you know the sender?" Say, "Yes, of course I know Ashley. She's a lawyer I'm working with for years." Okay. Have you expected anything from her? Yes, of course I expected that contract because we're exchanging emails on that for the last 5 days. So all those questions that you would ask, I said, yes, this is completely legit. And so you would open that document. But the great thing that the bad guy did is he actually added that password protected. So he practically blinded most of the security solutions on the way. So none of the email security solutions, none of the endpoint or anything that related to the transit could ever check that document because it's practically encrypted as it's password protected. So, so this was very, very, very clever attack. With Votiro, we understood that there is likelihood for such attacks, which is password protected malicious documents. So we added a workflow, in fact, that detects password protected, and instead of just blocking them altogether like some of the solutions are doing, we're asking the user, can you provide us the password for that document? And once the user provides the password, we're decrypting that document. we're doing all that magic of CDR and delivering a safe version of that encrypted document to the user. So in fact, that employee in that financial organization opened the document and it was just safe. So maybe he was not interested in the actual content, but he was sure that he's expecting that, and no harm actually ever done to that organization. But we saw similar attacks in a lot of other organizations, and and we see those very, very sophisticated hijacks happening more and more.
The more you explain it, the more it makes sense. It's the whole paradigm shift. Don't look for the bad stuff. Just take out the good stuff in a safe manner. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Um, Tell me about how the platform is deployed. How long does it take? Can you do cloud or on-prem?
Sure. So Votiro's platform is a cloud-based platform, but we do have an on-prem version for some those customers who are more sensitive or maybe bigger enterprises. We do have that as well, but we are hosting completely scalable, highly available Votiro solution on the cloud. That is Zero Trust Votiro Cloud on over AWS. This is one. But I want to touch on another point. I talked about emails, but we saw a lot of clients of ours saying, we started from email, but we're getting a lot of content now being shared via Slack, via
Oh yeah.
bots, through OneDrive and SharePoint. And some of the solutions that we do have in place, they're not protecting from those sources. So in Votiro, we kind of have an holistic approach. So we do have our core technology, and we wrap it with a variety of connectors. So we can easily connect to Office 365, but also to your Box deployments, also Slack, Dropbox, and we're soon going on some more integrations. And we now just recently released a browser plugin. So anything that the employee is downloading also being protected by the same technology. So before that document hits the hard drive or actually the browser, the file is being completely disarmed and being presented as it used to be without any threat in it. So first, the platform obviously can be cloud-based or is cloud-based, but the variety of connectors and how we really wrapping the organization from all the variety of incoming sources of documents, this is extremely important as we see an influx of new documents out there.
And what's the user experience? How aware am I as an end user that this is working in the background?
So if you think about what we had previously, like years ago, the sandboxing solutions, so it took like minutes to run the file in the sandbox because you were trying to wait for something bad to happen. Now, with Votiro positive selection and CDR technology, you're not trying to render the file. So you're doing some deterministic process, which practically take milliseconds. So in fact, the latency is sub-second anyway. So the user does not notice that we were there anyway. Also, from the user experience perspective, it gets the exact same file format. For example, if I was sending the user an Excel spreadsheet, he would receive an Excel spreadsheet. Looks exactly the same formulas, same charts, same content, and exact same look and feel. So in fact, it took us actually, to be honest, like several years to polish the technology to get to the point where the user they don't even notice that we're there.
Excellent. What are your customers' biggest concerns when you're out talking to them?
So I think that the most of the question is that we want to see that this actually works and how you can show us that you really blocked that malicious documents. So one of the things that we did introduce is we introduced a smart retrospective scanning. In fact, when we disarming a threat in a document, we not necessarily know that in real time. Remember, because I told you we're taking only the good stuff, and then we, deliver that, but we not necessarily know that we really stopped anything in real time. So what we did is that we're storing the original content for a few days, and after a few days, we're rescanning it with the traditional scanning software. In fact, those traditional AV takes them maybe weeks to get the new signature, but after a week or couple of weeks, we scan that, and then we can tell the client or the end user, look, 2 weeks ago you received a document. Don't worry, you're safe. But we can now tell you that that sample was malicious and no one in the world knew that back then. In that way, we could really show how, I mean, we provide that return on investment and really protecting from those highly sophisticated and newly created samples of those threats.
Awesome. Do you ever, when you're blocking malicious content, do you ever have like a false positive scenario where you actually block content that was not malicious that should have gone through to the end user?
So, so yes and no. In our notion, there is no such thing as false positive, but we do have, in some cases, of course, excluding software bugs and some other things, but we actually tracking the number or the occurrence of things that we're blocking that we shouldn't be blocking or should be changing. And on the last year or couple of years, we got it below the 0.01% of the traffic. So that happens, to be honest, but
Hmm.
relatively low, and we have our customer support process in order to improve and solve that.
You know, with traditional platforms like this, the paradigm where you're looking for something malicious and then you will block that or block the whole document. Um, the the companies are typically looking out at the dark web and trying to understand, the evolution of the different types of attacks that are being used, right? And they're developing tools that are preventing the most commonly occurring attacks. In your case, you're not as concerned about the attacks because you're just extracting the useful content, regardless of the type of attack. But I'm wondering then, do you have to be looking out at the new types of content that customers are using so that you can be sure that you're extracting the good stuff in the appropriate manner? Is that a challenge at all?
So that's a great question because if you think about that, as we chasing the good content or the let's say the benign content, in fact, the process that we did for the last few years, we took the file format, let's say Word document, and Microsoft published the specification of that file format. Now, luckily, they're not changing the format that much because if they would be changing the format frequently, they would be breaking a lot of the Microsoft Word applications out there. Because if you're running Microsoft Word 2003, you still be able to open recent documents that created with the Microsoft Office like from the last year, right? So
Hmm.
we're actually leveraging that the file format is more or less being kept, I mean, relatively in the same shape, and once we completed the process of developing Votiro's technology for that Word document structure or for the PDF, it's more or less becomes stable. So we don't need to chase the new content. But obviously, when releasing a new file format, which we, for example, PDF released 3, 4 years ago or more than that, we had to kind of polish it, but then it got just stable. So in fact, we don't need to just to chase the bad stuff as we're not looking for the bad stuff. And luckily, the good structure is being kept stable, as otherwise we wouldn't be have all those PDF readers out there stable. Otherwise, they would be just breaking every week.
Makes sense. How do you handle audio, video content that's attached to messages or that is, being downloaded or uploaded to, different platforms?
So that's a great question. So to answer for that, first we do support audio and video formats. We just recently added that support for supporting most of the common formats out there. But to be honest, a lot of the traffic these days, it's not, they're not sharing audio and video anymore. Usually those being uploaded to content sharing websites. This is what we see. Yet with some business processes. For example, a lot of customers from, let's say, banks, they're opening the system to the client. So for example, there is a client-facing portal allowing their client to upload documents, to upload, for example, like insurance company or health insurance company, you can upload a doctor report, or sometimes if you had an accident, you can upload an image or a video of something happened to your car. So they asked us whether we can have Votiro on that client-facing portal, upload the data. So we have Votiro's API, so we can easily integrate with any application like that application, and we do support video and audio that their clients are uploading. So before the someone from the claim processing department actually touches that video and checked how to categorize or how to classify that claim, that video, that image is completely safe. So that insurance company can know that it can continue to do business without getting impacted by any of those attacks.
Again, makes a lot of sense. You know, oftentimes a certain GIF or meme will get super popular and people will start sharing it with all their friends or their colleagues. They might share it in a Teams channel or in a chat or via email. And like if I was a bad actor, if I put my bad actor hat on, I would wait for the next big, super popular GIF, put some bad code in there and just start sharing it and just get it out there. Like, I don't know if you remember the Bernie Sanders thing where he was at the inauguration with his mittens, and everybody in the world shared that, and Bernie was popping up in all these funny places with his mittens on, all you'd have to do is put some bad code in there because the thing went viral like, mega times. So how would your system help in something like that?
So with images, one thing that we do, and that's something we also patented, is that we know how to inject micro changes into those images. So we know how to take, for example, that JPEG or PNG document, and by reconstructing it and actually recreating the pixels in a way that if there was something embedded in it, some code, it will be broken. And the way that we do that by injecting those invisible micro changes, if you think about a code has to be run bit by bit, right? You cannot
Yeah.
even touch a bit in it, otherwise it'll be invalidated and the processor would just throw an exception and that's it. So so in fact, by introducing micro changes which are invisible to the human eye but are catastrophic to the bad guy, that's how we can easily disarm any threat within that embedded within pixels of an image.
That is pretty darn cool. What can you tell me about your business? Like, how are you in terms of your growth trajectory? Where are you active? What type of customers are you working with?
Sure. So we actually, as I told you, I'm based in Tel Aviv. We founded the company in Israel several years ago. We started actually our business outside of Israel in Japan and Singapore, which is very interesting, strange or interesting. And we were very successful around government and banking and financial. And just a couple of years ago, or a bit more than that, we started our first steps in the US. And now most of our business and the company focus both on sales, marketing, and technical support is based in the US. We do have customers mostly in the financial BFSI, like insurance, banking, retail, shipping companies, law firms. In fact, almost every sector out there. As we do have our cloud platform, recently we started to onboard some smaller customers like mid-sized enterprises and small enterprises. And to be honest, soon we're gonna initiate a very new platform that targets MSPs and MSSPs to actually get Votiro's kind of, as you mentioned, that paradigm change and that new approach to actually smaller customers and bigger audience, as we believe that if, for example, in my mom's shop, she wouldn't need to actually bother checking whether she was expecting that document or that email from someone, just opening any document without the need to think twice. I think that will be a great benefit for, especially for those who are not security savvy, because we're just letting them work. They don't need to really think about that security thing and just being productive in their business.
Excellent. And are Most of your customers, are they inbound? They're looking for a solution on the web, or do you have both inbound and outbound sales?
So we have both inbound and outbound. I cannot say that there's something that is more than the other. We are working with local partners and resellers, and we have technology partnerships, both with like companies like the SIM vendors like Microsoft, Sentinel, and Sumo Logic. And we do have integrations with, for example, with the Broadcom, with the security, and we do have integrations with Fortinet and with some other folks. So we can actually work very well with existing solutions as well and with their partners.
Excellent. And what's next for you?
So as I mentioned, two things that coming up. One is the support for MSPs and MSSPs, because we want to deliver that promise and the new paradigm for smaller organizations, not necessarily for the mid-sized enterprises or the big enterprises. This is one. And the second thing that we are going to get into PII detection. We believe that we produce threat-free documents, but we also want to produce PII-free documents. We found that a lot of our customers are saying, look, we're receiving documents from outside. We don't want to be liable. And sometimes we're receiving private information. We don't want to get under those acts and being liable. So we are starting to add as an add-on to our product to actually remove or mask or redact private information that shouldn't be there. So you can get threat-free documents, but also PII-free documents.
That's interesting. That's a whole nother use case there. Because I mean, obviously anybody who's subject to GDPR, well, a variety of different regulatory bodies require, very specific methods for handling PII, and as such, data becomes almost a liability or potential liability, and so just to block it from the start is that's again another paradigm shift. Very cool. Well, hey, Aviv, if people want to get more information about Votiro, what's the best way for them to do that?
So the best way, just go to Votiro's website. So it's votiro.com, and I will be happy to schedule a demo. We're happy to share with you some of the resources out there on the website. And of course, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to hear your feedback, your concern, your questions. I think that there's no better way than knowing the field and the market and just interacting between us humans. And as an entrepreneur, I love to get direct feedback. So if anyone want to reach out to me, would love to have a 10-minute chat whenever they're free.
Awesome. Well, hey, Aviv, thank you so much for being on Secure Talk.
Thank you very much, Mark, and have a great day.
Hello, welcome to Secure Talk, your trusted source of information on the latest threats, trends, tools, and technology related to cybersecurity and compliance.